All right, all right. I'm super excited. Another great episode of the Legacy Lounge podcast. Today we have a special guest. Oh man, I just want to jump into this. But we have Ben Killoy, and Ben is a Marine husband, father of three.
Four.
You're father of four? Man. Okay.
As of January?
December.
A recent baby. Man.
Mm-hmm. 12, 9, 7, and 6 months.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So I know we were talking earlier. Your passion is to really help fathers, help men in general. And we were talking because June is Men's Mental Health Month. And there's so much that we can go on and talk about with mental health. Ben, first of all, is there anything that you want to say about men's mental health and just bringing more awareness to that?
I would say the biggest lie that any man tells himself is that whatever thoughts you're having, the first lie that you usually sell yourself is you're the only one having this because of comparative. Everybody looks like they have it together. So then you feel like you're the only one. And I know in my podcast journey that one of my number one goals is to simply say something that someone else was thinking. And then they would start questioning, like, that guy just said what I said. I wonder what else I could be wrong about. And that maybe I'm not the only one feeling that. So challenge what those beliefs are and realize that part of men's mental health is realizing we all have a common thread of struggle. It's just not as many people are willing to talk about it.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, that's gold right there. I know we titled this episode "The Legacy of Leadership" because you are pretty much an expert when it comes to leadership, especially being a father for being a Marine, and then the things that you've said to me personally, and also some of the things that I've seen you do with others. So I have a lot of questions on leadership and legacy. But first, I would like to ask, what is leadership to you?
Leadership to me, and it took me a long time to put all this together, I would say 20 years. The first breadcrumb that was given to me in the Marine Corps that I didn't fully remember and learn how to apply is know thyself and seek self-improvement. That is one of the core Marine Corps leadership ethos. And I remembering it in the Marine Corps. But I didn't remember how to apply it, and I didn't understand its importance. And what that really means is leadership needs a word in front of it to really make it the most applicable and the easiest to figure out: self-leadership. And to me, once you put that all together, you learn that your self-leadership begins to shape your life leadership. And if your life isn't working out, it's generally your self-leadership that is in the way, and is the first place to start.
Man, so then how do we go about leading ourselves?
Well, it's complicated, but then also it's extremely simple. It's, do you have still people that mother you? Do you still have people that need to remind you to get out of bed? How well are you capable at functioning as a full, mature, emotionally regulated human being? And any bugs that you have that prevent you from being that, those bugs are things that you can work on, whether it be waking up on time, getting to work on time, whether it being calm with your kids, being calm with your coworkers, being calm with your team, whatever may or may not be in the way from you being that definition that I just said. Those are the low-hanging fruit to start with. And anything within that category is something worthy of working on. And it doesn't have to be a heavy hitter. But something as simple as just brushing your teeth twice a day. Anything that you think that you know that everybody should be doing, or things that you've already learned that you're supposed to be doing and you haven't really implemented them, those are the easiest places to start. And it doesn't have to be that you have to go to college for leadership. You don't have to read 10 books on leadership. You can literally start with, what do I know that I need to be doing that I'm not? And start there.
Man. You said so much. What do I know that I need to be doing, and just start there? Because I know for me, sometimes that it is like, hey, getting up, going to the gym, eating right. So really, it's just, you're talking about the choices that we make.
Correct. And life boils down to choices. And within the context of where most people feel stuck, most people don't feel like they have a choice, that they feel that their back's up against the wall. But really, it comes down to we're always making a choice. We just don't consciously recognize that we're making a choice to stay the same. We're making a choice to not improve. And if we don't consciously think about the current choices that we're saying yes to, whether we know them or not, like if we don't go to the gym, well, then we're consciously choosing to probably have less energy today, or unconsciously choosing to have less energy today. And understanding how those simple choices can change your life, but also then how they're also the ones holding your back. Because when you also feel like there's nothing that you can do, or your back's up against the wall, or if at any moment in your day Eeyore shores up and you're more playing the victim mindset of like, man, today's just like every other day. Nothing in my life's ever going to get better. That part of your belief system is a choice. You're choosing to continue to believe those things to be true. And your mind, your thoughts, your actions, and your feelings all come from your belief system. So whatever you do or you don't believe about yourself, you're both right. And that's a choice. So however you feel your life isn't working out, there's always a choice. And Morgan Freedom, I love, he said it once, that the bus for success comes every day. You can choose to get on it or not, but it'll be here tomorrow. There's very few things in the modern 2024 that really, if you think about it, are in your way. The only thing in your way is generally your belief that there's something in your way.
Yeah. Wow. How did you get to that point? Like, what happened in your life to get to that point to be like, hey, I really do have a choice? Because you said that sometimes we're just not aware of it. So like, what turned on that light bulb for you?
I'll set it up by doing two things. One, that what most people need is more width in life. Most people grow up learning that there's about 3 lanes of life, and you can pick one, and that should take you to the unicorns. The second thing that most people are missing is depth. They don't have a clear understanding of who am I, and more importantly, who are you when God said your name to exist? And understanding those two components, by having width, by having the depth, you can understand how God uniquely designed you to be plugged into this world. And if you don't have depth, then you feel like you're lost in this world. But if you don't have width, you can often feel like you're in the wrong place. Maybe you have depth, but you don't feel like you're in the right spot. But the reality is life is a million lanes wide. So I didn't have any of that perspective when I transitioned out of the Marine Corps. When I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, they have a program called TAPS. It's a 3-week course. They essentially are telling you how to be a civilian again. They essentially issue this plan to you. They tell you about the GI Bill. They tell you to get a degree. They tell you to go off and start hiring and interviewing. And I adopted that. It was issued to me almost. And I went to school. I got a job. I was unemployed for 2 weeks. I checked every box that they told me to check until it wasn't working anymore. So when I got out, I started working for a major OEM manufacturer, and I was doing things with electricity. So I wanted to become an expert in electricity. So I just started going for electrical engineering. And I was 3 years, or I got an associate's degree in arts and sciences, and then I was working towards a bachelor's in engineering. But then I started failing classes. And so I got out in 2007, and I started failing classes in 2014. And I was like, you know what? Because if you fail them, you got to take them again. And I'm like, I need to figure out what the problem is here before I just throw more GI Bill money at this. And I also had just welcomed my daughter at the time, who was 2 years old. And I had a son on the way. And I remember also during this time looking in my daughter's eyes, like, who am I as your father to try to take you into your life when I can barely do it for myself? Like, I'm such a freaking imposter. Like, how can I trust myself if I can't even trust, or how can you trust me if I can't even figure it out my own? And so I dropped out of college to take a break. But the problem was, what I didn't really know is I didn't have wisdom. I didn't have a circle of people around me to collect that wisdom, to see perspective. I was just operating on fear, really. And so once I dropped out, I was like, oh, that degree was supposed to make everything better. Once I got to the other side of the fence, there was greener grass. Well, now that's gone. Like, now it's just dead grass. Like, what do I do? And I still had a job. So, like, things were still being paid, but I had no plan to figure out, like, the dream had ran its course. I'm like, well, this just seems like something went wrong. And then I went to a seminar for making the transition from staff to supervisor. And the man who taught the course had a golden voice, so he was easy to listen to. But then he was asking all these questions about leadership, and I just kept raising my hand over and over. And what I didn't know is that in the civilian world, when you're 24, they barely trust you to run the copier, let alone to run a team. But in the Marine Corps, that's what we did. And so understanding that, we then go ahead and take that idea and just get confused by it. So for me, I took that idea and remembered that, like, I liked leadership. His story inspired me. Like, I want to become an expert in leadership because it seems like anybody can get a degree and be an expert in a thing, but to be an expert in people and influencing and achieving goals, that seems like something rare in the universe. And I want to become an expert on that. That's still, just because I had the idea, didn't necessarily produce any results. So go back to your question. Everything that I have learned was born out of my deep desire to get away from where I was. And so as I started learning more about me and learning different lanes of life and learning that there's more width to the world than I was ever made aware of, a few things started happening. People came up to me and said, Ben, the way you put words together is not like other people. I'm like, that's interesting. No one's really ever said that. I'm 33. That's good feedback. I'll write that down. And then people would say, like, Ben, you made me feel something that I didn't know I needed to feel. And I'm like, oh, no one's ever said that either. And so I started getting this feedback that there was something unique. These are those things that when God said Ben Killoy, that were inherently in me, but no one ever helped me see them, which is ultimately why I always tell people we need friends in our life, because friends become the mirrors for the value that we can't see ourselves. It's often very difficult to read the label on the bottle when we're inside the bottle. It's why coaching works. It's why therapy works. It's why just having a good friend that you can talk to can make your life better. But most men, and the statistics are only getting worse, don't have a close friend that they could talk to. If they had something bad happen in their family, they would have no one to call and rely on. And one other thread through this all. So when I first turned 30, or I only turned 30 once. When I turned 30, I was going through my first midlife crisis. Jay Leno had just left The Tonight Show. And everybody, and I was a big Jay Leno fan. I always loved his integrity, his character. And everybody came out on stage to thank Jay for being in their life. Thank you, Jay, for giving me that opportunity. I would not be where I am without you. And then I had this dark thought. I don't think a single person's going to care that I was here. And I was like, what do you do with that kind of dark, morbid thought? And I often describe it when I'm speaking. It's like Independence Day when the alien attack ship settles in over New York City and you're looking up as a person and you're like, how the heck what am I going to do? This thing is massive. What's the virus essentially going to take down this massive ship? And I had a friend give me this little riddle. If you want something in your life you've never had, well, then it stands to reason you need to start doing things that you've never done. Because everything you've done accumulatively up to this point has got you the results that you've gotten. And if those results are not what you want, it stands to reason there's something completely outside of what you're currently doing that is probably the thing that's going to change your life. So I used that. And I was like, what's the one thing that I've never had, but I've always wanted? Friends. I never had good friends. And I was like, well, why don't you have good friends? And I quickly realized, remember those girls that you asked out in high school that rejected you and they said no? Well, you subconsciously just applied that to everybody because it sucked. And so you just didn't talk to anybody. And I'm like, well, that's a silly reason not to have friends. And to understand that component, to understand that piece of the puzzle, that was so like instrumental, because what I realized in the super simple path of getting better was I was always at the park with dads. But I always had this thought of like, they had a hard day like I did. They just want to sit there and play with their kids. They don't want to talk to me. And then one day I just said, screw it. And I said hello. And it turns out we were both playing chicken. And that simple step, that ability to recognize that something in my life wasn't working and to do something differently and self-lead myself to a change, and realizing how amazing and how much power is on the other side of a hello, that now my mindset is I'm always one hello away from a completely different life.
Oh,
Because you can
man.
meet someone that blows your mind, that provides a lane of traffic that you're like, you do what and make how much and have how much spare time? You don't get to unmeet those people. And that's on the other side of hello. And so I've rinsed and repeated that to now understand that the amount of opportunity I'm producing in my life is directly proportional to the amount of new hellos that I introduce my life regularly.
Man, beautifully
That's
said.
the furnace where everything that I've learned comes from.
Yeah. Ashley, is there anything that you want to say about that?
I feel like that last comment just like describes our relationship, Tino.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
I got to give a shout out to Dr. Sheila Hill, because she was the first person that made it so clear to me when she was talking about the power of the hello. But I know something that we were talking about before we got live and off air is the power of a handshake. You know, so because usually that's what follows the hello, especially when men are talking. It's usually like hello, little introduction and a handshake. I'm not even going to spoil that. I'm going to let you talk about the power of the handshake.
Well, the handshake is often something as, I don't know, probably as 500 years old. Handshakes have been a thing that humans have been doing to introduce each other, especially in Western cultures, as long as there's been Western cultures. And I was recently at a conference and I was giving a handshake and I was like, this is as much as I got. And he was really trying to get more out of me. Like, that's as much as I got. And he simply told me this crazy story of how he met Ronald Reagan in the 80s when he was president. And Ronald Reagan carried a stress ball with him. And he asked him, like, why do you carry a stress ball? And he's like, because I need to project strength. And my handshake is the first thing that I get to do that with. And he was always practicing it. But I'll actually take it to another level that I didn't introduce when I was talking about the handshake, that even more powerful than the handshake is the hug. And so my entire life has never been a hugger. No one in my family hugs. I would never hug anybody really, whether it be a female or a man, nothing. And then I went to a conference for dads, and so it was only men. But I was really nervous because I had been with them online, but never in person. And as I went in person, I just started shaking hands. I'm like, I'm not going to be the one to hug. I kind of knew it might happen, but I'm like, I am not a hugger. And so a few people quickly upgraded and said, like, no, we're not shaking hands, we're hugging. And so I was like, I went with the flow. But by the end of those 2 days, I was labeled as the guy that gave the best hugs. And so since that day in 2017, it is now my handshake. That anytime, even at this conference that I was just recently at speaking, I left every one of those conversations like, I don't shake hands, I give hugs. And what I've often hear after hug is often people are like, oh, that's a good one. And you don't think about that, hug? But depth, deep, like the pressure, not letting go instantly, or giving kind of like maybe what you often see from like your aunt or uncle or something is that quick fake hug of like, oh, it's so nice to see you. But like a good deep embrace to another man, that may sound extremely weird, but it's one of the things that is most life-giving, and it often feels like it's something that you've waited your entire life for once you have one. And that's something that I do it, whether, I mean, I always ask permission. I'm not necessarily going up and hugging just because I can, but that's something that often people like, they're now remembering me by based on how I hug them. Instead of just
I literally have a picture of him hugging my friend Kim. I don't even know if you took. No, I took this picture.
I did not know
it
you
was so profound.
Wow.
I was like, I gotta get this, because like Kim is one of the most positive people in my circle. You guys are right up there with her, and I was like, these Ben and Kim are really gonna hit it off, and they did. And that's why I gotta capture this moment. But Ben, do you ever run across somebody that's like, nope, sorry, I'm not a hugger? And
no, I have yet to run across anybody who says they're not a hugger. And generally,
like, okay,
I would have probably never
card.
started talking to them if I had that vibe. Like, I probably can pick up on that very quickly. But generally, I find also what you find is, unless you're in a mob at a concert with the full random population of society, generally, based on your own leadership, based on your own direction that you're choosing, you generally don't find yourself in places where these aren't your people. And so unless you're going into Facebook Marketplace and buying something off of Facebook Marketplace and giving a hug there, you're probably that's probably where you're going to get the full sample of the universe. Like you kind of forget what crazy looks like until you go to sell something. But most of the times that you're going to places, it's within the people that you've already kind of circled around. There's already some pre-filter, and it already kind of the universe is already calibrated. Like you wouldn't be there if it wasn't some of your people that you would get around with.
Yeah, so Kevin said people underestimate a good hug. It's like an unspoken conversation that is much needed between both parties. Wow.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll even go a
Well
little bit
said.
deeper than that. So last year I was in a little bit of funk and I was working with a therapist. And I remember thinking, like, I wish I could get more hugs. Like, I just don't have enough people locally like I could go hug. And then I had this crazy thought. It's like, what would it be like to receive a hug from God every day? And then quickly, like, just popped in my mind without thinking much, sunrise. That the sun is literally like one of the best places you can get a hug from God. And so I literally last summer would get up before the sunrise and go sit on a curb where there was a perfect view of it rising over the horizon, and the feeling of the chill before and the warmth after,
Yeah.
it would be like a nuke that would wash away any darkness in my mind. And I would feel like I could go make $1 million in any given day. I had that hug. No matter what dark thoughts were lingering from waking up, no matter what dark thoughts of thinking of like, you know what, you should just give these dreams up. All of those things, anything left over from the devil in the darkness was gone by receiving that hug from God.
That's a good way to start the day.
Exactly.
Man, you know, because I have definitely felt that chill to warmth just sitting there watching the sunrise. But thinking of it as a hug from God, man, that definitely puts a new meaning on it.
And there's a song that also hit me in the same spot of Here I Am, Lord. And it's something that was sung many times in Catholic Mass, but it's now Christian music that has taken it over as well. And there's a part of like, here I am, Lord, just kind of waiting for my day to begin. And there's a lyric in that song that kind of became my metaphor is, and I will hold your people in my hands. So it was this reminder that like, here I am, I've prepared myself to receive you. And now my day begins by going through with open hands and holding anybody in my hands that you bring into my life and giving them whatever I can with what I know. And then moving on to the next day.
I love it. Do you consider yourself a hugger?
Yeah, I've been told that I've given really good hugs, and I'm just like, what goes? Like, I never thought about it. It's like, okay, I accepted that, but I did not know what goes into it. Like actually thinking about the embrace, the depth, the pressure, the impact, just, wrapping people up. I just thought, hey, I'm a big guy, my arms are long, and I just bring you in. But now I'm looking at it in a whole different way. And it's just mind blowing.
You're going to give, like, you've leveled up on the hugs.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The only place I've ran into a problem is hugging my wife while she's breastfeeding because her breasts are filled with milk and it's uncomfortable. That's like the one place.
That's a good takeaway.
Like,
that's
too much pressure. Like you gotta pull back.
Oh man. Well, speaking since you brought up your wife and your children, so one of the things that obviously we got to talk about is legacy. What does legacy mean to you, Ben?
In the way of the context, weaving it in with family and your kids is, especially for men, is we often get so focused on what we're doing here on this earth, that what we're building with our career, our visions, our businesses. But the real, and I learned this lesson with the military veterans because military veterans get so hung up on our service. What did that service mean? Why did those 4 years mean? What if we went to war? What was all that pain? What was the purpose of all that pain? And we just get hung up on questions that have no good answers. And so as I extrapolated that to fatherhood, I quickly converted it down to that what we do on this earth is important, but what we leave behind is 10 times more important. And that really was born out of a full-on dad moment where I was watching the movie Coco. And Coco is about the Day of the Dead, which is an idea that as long as people remember your picture and that they remember your name, you get to come across the bridge and come across for that one day and be with your family. And I had this question that popped in my mind. When is a veteran forgotten? And I created a blog post, and I even was invited to read it at a dad conference as well, because a veteran is only forgotten when someone stops repeating their name. And we essentially die twice, when we actually die and the last time someone says our name. And so your legacy is really as long as that goes on. The longest time someone says your name, that will be the end of your legacy. So the question is, if you look at some of the longest legacies that people are still talking about today, what makes them worth remembering? The story. And oftentimes, one thing that men do not do, and the older generation that wasn't within their fields really holds these back the most, is our story. And there's three components to the story that really can cement your legacy within your family name, that 200 years from now, people could be remembering Grandpa Killoy. And that is how you've loved, how you've lived, and how you led. That if you pass on to people within your family and share stories of those three categories, you're passing on the wisdom of your life in a way that will be remembered. But most people do not focus on that. And to me, whether that be the work leadership, whether that be relationship leadership, whether that be the trials that you learned the hard way in marriage before you had kids, those are the things that create a strong legacy. And if you want to leave something behind worth leaving behind, it's not your possessions. It's what you're going to leave behind in them, in those stories and wisdom. And that's what's going to really create the lasting legacy, where your last time someone remembers your name is 500 years from now.
Man, that is absolutely powerful. Because I know what I always tell all of my clients being in financial services is that it's not what you leave to them, but what you leave in them. And you said it's how you loved, how you lived, and how you led. And to just put it in that framework, man, I mean, that's just a filter now for how we can do anything in our lives. Man.
And even within the context of like thinking through this, there's a component to legacy that seems complicated, that seems almost frustrating. But if we go back to history, there's a great example where this went wrong. So we have the Greatest Generation from the 90s, or not the 90s, the 40s. And that generation learned it through the Depression. We had World War II won because of that adversity. The 50s were some of the most roaring, amazing times of that generation. But if you read Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, when he was asking them what they wished for their kids, they almost all unanimously said, I want my kids to have a better life than I did. Which on the surface seems like, yeah, everybody would want their kids to have a better life than the Depression. But in that single sentence, they took away the one thing that made them the greatest generation. And so the reframing of that is, you don't want your kids to have a better life than you. You want your kids to have a more capable life than you. And capability comes from wisdom, learning, story, being there to be a supportive person as they struggle with life. Because even to convert that to $1 million, and even wealth, I don't want my kids, and they may get $1 million out of me, but I don't want my kids to have $1 million. It's more important for me to leave behind in them how to make $1 million. Because millionaires have proven over and over that kids can blow $1 million pretty quickly. However, if they understand the capability to recreate $1 million, it's irrelevant how much wealth you leave behind. Because now you've left something inside them that is more capable of dealing with adversity and change and being able to adapt, that doesn't have to use a set of principles that were just handed down. And that's a simpler way to say of something that with legacy is you're leaving behind capability. And if you're not sharing who you are, or you're only out there earning a living, or you're not teaching your kids who they could be and helping them see that, then you're really not helping them understand that capability of who God said they could be when they said their name.
Man, especially when it comes to family and children and kids, that's super important. My mind goes to that saying of, teach a man how to fish instead of giving him the fish. Yeah.
But we don't use that when we argue against better. And the better life is almost universally adopted, I would say. It's like what people consider the gold standard of, yes, this is what I want for my kids. And because of that, and because consumerism is such its own runaway thing, all of that just gets consumed in more stuff instead of more capability.
Mm-hmm.
And so better is just something that Toys R Us used to sell us more toys in the 90s. And that marketing uses to sell us on more Netflix. Like, better is not more Netflix time.
Yeah.
Better is having the wisdom to discern Netflix and working out.
Yeah, and then also just having that time with your family as well. Because I was listening to something that you did recently, and one of the things is that you said kids spell love Time, and I was like, whoa, like, man, I don't even have kids, and that hit me.
And because it's such a simple, but it's true, is that especially for kids under 6 has been my experience, that kids under 6, most of their behavior comes from a time deficit. And another way to say that is if your kids have a bad day at school, they don't come home and say they had a bad day at school. They come home and say, Dad, will you play with me? But if we don't have the wisdom to see that, then we don't. And even more so, your kids are testing you with the little things when it doesn't matter, because what they do to matter to them, whether it be a playground issue, whether it be a bullying issue, whether it just be a friend doesn't want to play with me anymore, it doesn't matter how silly it is. You losing a job is the equivalent to anything a kid deals with. And early in life, your kids are testing you so that later in life, they can know they can bring you the big things. And when your kid's in an accident for the first time, they will remember early on, could I trust my dad?
Whoa.
Can I trust his response to be gentle?
You gotta back that up and say that again. They're testing you with the little things early in life to know that they can bring you the big things later. Is that what you said?
Correct. And even another scarier example is if your daughter's at a party and she's 17 and she doesn't feel safe, she's going to remember, were you there when I didn't feel safe when I was 7?
I felt that.
Ooh. Yeah.
And I believe most teenage issues, I'm just getting ready to go to them, so scientifically I'll be able to answer this in 5 years, whether I'm right. But most teenage issues come from that we burn out the relationship with our kids for obedience under 10, which then sacrifices the relationship that we have with our kids. And then we really need a relationship with these kids the most, and they need us to be an advocate in their life to help them through them trying to stand up on their own as their teenager. They don't trust us because all we wanted was obedience. We never really demonstrated that we cared what you felt.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was a shot.
No, I see that. I'm a stepmom to 3 teenage girls, and it is not easy. And recently, the youngest, who just turned 14, said that she didn't want to go to camp anymore. And I was like, you were telling me you loved camp. She was like, well, I was thinking about it, and there was this boy that actually made me feel really uncomfortable. And I was like, well, then let's go talk. Let's go talk to the camp leaders. And, I told her that a day or two in advance. And when we got there, she's like, you know what? I'm going to see how today goes. And then I'll let you know if I need you tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. And she did great. She had an awesome time again. And I'm like, sometimes it's about teaching people how to treat you. And we got to teach, these, especially these little boys, that's not how we treat girls, or, even if it doesn't make you uncomfortable in that moment, but later on you think about it and you're like, you know what, we got to draw that boundary. So she's had a great time all week. She's woke up this morning saying it's water day. So it was very successful as far
And
as
even
that's
as
concerned.
a higher example, that little moment, whether it's the boy that makes her feel uncomfortable or a girl that makes her feel uncomfortable, little do they know, and I think most adults forget this, that happens in adulthood.
Absolutely.
That you run into coworkers that make you feel uncomfortable, and being there as a parent to help them through that feeling so they don't get stuck on it will make them a better employee 20 years later.
Absolutely. And talk it out. Don't just sit on it or quit. To face it head on, because those are tough conversations that we got to have, and it can change everything. So,
and when you think about just the simple idea of working through things, there was a story I read in a book once that the daughter had a teacher that she wasn't getting along with, and she was in like second grade. And now there's a world where most parents would try to remove the child from the grade and get a different teacher, or maybe even the extreme of get a different school. Well, this dad, and she was a daughter, essentially committed to ride to school every day with his daughter so they could talk about what they were going to do differently to handle the difficult feelings that she might be feeling. And the ability to walk with your kids through the feelings are meant to be felt and understood, not suppressed. And so your ability to be present with every feeling that your kids have and to be a witness, an anchor, a grounding mechanism that allows them to get through it, that's how you create a healthy, capable, mature, emotionally stable adult, is those little micro moments. And if you're not there, or you don't have a relationship that's capable of channeling a safe conversation through that, or they just know that you're going to shout and tell them to stop crying or stop feeling that way, even if they are 14. And if you teach them to shut it down, I mean, there's another angle to this whole perspective that I always explain to coaching clients is if you think of a house that's fully illuminated when you're a kid, growing up, you're going to go into different rooms to explore this brand new operating system. It's like Inside Out, and you get these new circuit boards and new control panels. And if you go into a room and you learned that if I cry and I get shouted at, or in the extreme case, maybe abused, you're going to learn I don't touch that doorknob. And you're going, and those early years, the brain's wired for survival. So anything you do between like 5 and 25 is rooted in survival. And anything that your brain learns that's going to make sure that it survives, it just turns off usually. And most adults run into a place where they're living in a 15-room house, but they only can occupy 2 rooms. And your ability to make sure that none of those rooms ever get turned off as a parent, and to make sure that your kids feel safe exploring all of those rooms. And if you're hearing this and you feel like you're living those 2 rooms as an adult, that's a sign that you need to do the work. And you don't know why the work matters. I was just sharing this recently on Facebook that you don't know why when you start the work that you're going to really need the work. You might have a reason you start the work, but there's going to be a day that's like, man, I'm so glad I did the work. And in a very simple way, I've been doing the work for 10 years and I still have struggle. But there was a moment when the 6-month-old son woke up at 12 o'clock at night and started screaming, and my wife couldn't calm him down, and she was getting frustrated. But I had been with him on my own for 2 months prior as a stay-at-home dad. So I learned a few tricks with him, and I learned how to be calm with him, and I learned what makes him happy. I did 15 rounds of Wheels in the Bus, which made him laugh every time. Even though he was crying, he would stop. But then I also ended up at 1 a.m. sitting on the porch with him, looking at the stars, because I knew he likes, when he gets upset, just going outside makes him calm. And I never once lost my cool during that. And I was there, I was present, he fell back asleep, and the night went on. Had I not started the work, that would have been completely different. And my wife even complimented me, saying, you would have did that with the other kids. And so that 7-year gap between my youngest and him allowed me to be a completely different person to my wife as her husband, but also to Evan to make sure that he always feels safe in my arms. And I know when my daughter was like 4 or 5, just sitting near her, rubbing her back, not saying a word while she was crying or even being emotional, she would start calming down without me ever doing anything because I was calm. And that calmness is a legacy in and of itself. When people think of you, do they remember anger or do they remember calm?
Yeah.
That's a very good litmus test of whether you need to do the work or what kind of legacy are you leaving behind.
Yeah, that's absolutely true because especially with kids when they're going through something, uh it could be a pivotal moment and definitely a critical moment, a canon event, an anchor memory in their life. But for you, it could be just another Tuesday or Wednesday. So you're not really getting the scope because I'm sure there were things that have affected all of us that we went and tried to seek help for or reached out to somebody and the response that we got was not favorable. And we remember that. But to that person, it was just like, oh, I didn't even know that happened. And I'm like, yeah, this was a critical moment in life for me. So with that being said, also, I know you were talking about anchor memories. You want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, anchor memories are this idea that I learned working with veterans because my work started when the wars were still going on. That many men were deployed and women were deployed, but the part to realize, especially within the military community, that you often don't remember, or because maybe if you're a person with low empathy, you don't even register it, is that when you're gone, even if it's a small work trip, life still happens. Your wife probably has bad days. Your kids still can break up with boyfriends. Your kids can still get rejected. Your kids can still lose their virginity while you're gone on a deployment. And so life still happens. And there's still emotions that you're not there for, which many times build up resentment towards you. And when you get back home, you can't figure out why people are mad at you. And it's like, it's not that they're mad that you're back. They're just mad that when I really needed you, you weren't there. And so I helped create this idea called anchor memories is when you are home with what you do, are you creating moments in their life, whether it be fishing, going on a bike ride, something that happens consistently that they can go talk to you when you're not there? And essentially ask this powerful question, what would dad do? That if you did have the ultimate thing happen and you lose your life, either in service, an accident, doesn't matter, or early death, do your kids have a place that they can go sit and feel like that you're sitting there on the log with them? And that presence where they can feel like, what would dad tell me right now when I was going through this? And having the kids be able to have a conversation with you spiritually will allow them to be able to lean into your wisdom and your legacy long after you're gone. But most parents don't really think like that. But having those anchor memories that when life gives you a hard deal, how do your kids respond? Where do they go to ground themselves? And if you're in a position where you're gone a lot, having something that if they go have a difficult time with a girlfriend, that they can go sit or just do and they're connected with you. This really was validated. We used to ride the Quick Trip, and it was an 8-mile round trip. And one time my daughter was like, Dad, why do you do all this crazy stuff with us? Like riding bikes 8 miles a Quick Trip just to get a shake and then turn around. And my answer was, because one day I'm not going to be here and you're going to need to ask me something and you're going to go on a bike ride to get the answer. And it's that little component of legacy as a mechanism or as a tool in the toolbox that allows your legacy to actually show up as a verb that people can use. Because there was always something, even for me, if I wanted to connect with my dad after he's gone, I'll probably get in a tractor. And I'll be able to hear his wisdom, because that's where when I think of my dad, I think of in a tractor. Or when I'm on growing up, what memory is me sitting in the tractor, him on the back of the hay wagon, stacking the bales. And I'm me staring at him in the tractor, hearing him, looking at him, talking to himself all the time. I'm not sure what he was talking about. But like that memory is something that I have a very familiar relationship with. But most parents aren't really taking that idea and trying to create this deep of connection. So that way your legacy does live on forever. That's well beyond your wealth. $100 won't solve a problem when they have a hard time. They're going to need to know that they can be with you and kind of hear what you would say. Or maybe it's a lesson you've already said, but they need to be reminded of it and they need to go to the place that you told them it the first time.
Yeah, because we see it all around us in like television and movies and stuff, but it's just like, are we applying that to our own lives? You'll see somebody go on the hero's journey and then they're like out in the field or in a place where they've had a previous conversation, and then they're like, that loved one will come to mind and have that conversation with them, give them what they need to then go on and continue their life, continue their journey. But man, like just the way you said it, like it's just like all just coming at me, man. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
for my stepdaughters, I like, I try to always I emphasize their relationship with their father. I'm in the background doing the admin stuff. I know I do hold an important role as someone that my love is essentially a choice, being their stepmom, and that's always what you hear. But so I emphasize their relationship. I give him the freedom to improve his relationship with his kids, and then I have this journal, 3 journals, one for each one of them, and I just write to them. I date it, and I just write, this is something funny you said. This is your favorite color. These are the struggles you're going with. This is how you worked through it, kind of thing. And I don't have any feedback on it yet because I haven't given it to them. Wait till the youngest turns 18, but it's like something physical I can actually leave behind because who knows what'll be left by the time they're old enough. But it's just things that I don't want to forget. So there's so many
I've heard
facets
of a
to
similar
legacy.
thing done for dads that maybe don't get to be in their kid's life, either through a really bad divorce or the custody didn't work out the way that it wanted to, is they'll do like an email account and they'll send like pictures or thoughts, or when something happened and there was 2 sides and your side never got told, they'll share their side and then they'll share the password to that Gmail account when they're older. And that it allows what you need to say to come out. And it's a great way to pass on those things that they can pull from, because it's that richness of wisdom isn't something that many people seek out. Most people are not seeking out wisdom. But it's that ability to know where to go for it that makes the difference. And even what you said, the relationship with their dad, something that gets underestimated a lot is little kids are learning how to be a human by watching you. So that comes down to your ability to love, lead, and live, essentially. But more importantly, in the relationship with your daughters, are using your marriage with your husband to provide some type of hope and a blueprint that it's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
And any parents that do get divorced, I always push to say, you have an obligation to go find a love that blows your mind so that your kids don't give up on this institution of marriage, to know that it's something that's not worth going through. That to create a blueprint that's as high as the moon to shoot for. And as a husband, I can say that my daughters are going to learn what love looks like and feels like, because I'm the first masculine love they've ever had. And they will use that model to go out in the world and find it. And the absence of my model is often where you see girls going out in the world and having daddy issues, because they didn't get that firming love. And then they figure out they can get it from other boys, and then just figures out that it's just almost like a drug that never actually heals the hole. That ability comes from a father. So my son is learning what it actually means to be a strong, calm, capable man from me. And that model is something that he's learning how to be a human being. But if I don't go out and look and raise the bar, another way to say it is my ceiling is going to become their floor. And as long as I hear taking breath, I have a duty to increase that ceiling so that they know what to shoot for. They know not to settle. They know how good life can be. And most people don't have a high definition of how good life can be. Most people have, I often say what America really needs is a new definition of living, because ours really isn't working. And a simple way to change that is give them a better definition of living by creating it yourself.
Absolutely. I think it's important for young men, especially, to learn how to be a strong young man, but also to be soft where it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
Can you hold your
huge
daughter's heart in
in-
her hands without smashing it?
Absolutely. Yes. That's huge. So what advice would you give a man that's newly married at the relatively new stages of his career, has all the options in front of him, and his name is Tino?
I learned this lesson from watching the Czech Republic, the Czechs, because I used to work at a company that was headquartered in Prague. And they have this complete opposite way of living that we don't even begin to comprehend. They spend all of their 20s finding someone to love, living and loving with that person, creating a foundation that's 100 miles deep. And only in their 30s do they settle down and have kids. And so my advice to someone just getting started is you want to have a deep foundation. You want to do what I call the excavation work, that you can't build a skyscraper without going down to bedrock. Any attempt to do it will cause the skyscraper to slant or, worst case scenario, collapse. And so it's your duty and obligation when you first get started to build a solid foundation of love, to make sure that you've got a good component of understanding of how we want to live our life, where we want to live our life. What does our repetitive nature look like 10 years from now? Because oftentimes for me, I got out and got stuck in a cube, and I did that for 8 years. And I'm like, I feel like I just lost my entire soul. But I didn't have anybody to help understand that, like, maybe cube living isn't for you, or just because you're getting a paycheck, you should be happy. Well, like that never did it for me. And being able to ask those better questions before having kids would have allowed me to position myself so that it maybe wasn't so hard, because I was digging down to bedrock while there was a few stories on the skyscraper already with kids, and you've got bills, you've got obligations. Because for me, I did the standard American dream. I got out of the Marine Corps, started getting a degree, I got a house, got married, started having kids. But that American dream turned into my American hell, because I didn't spend enough time understanding how I wanted my life to be. And I also was in a big hurry to catch up to something that doesn't even exist. And making sure that I spend a deep amount of time understanding what do I want my life to look like. And this woman that I've committed to love, having such a deep foundation of love with this woman that when kids show up and test it, you never point the weapon at each other.
That's huge. I love that.
Man,
What's your feedback, Tino? Mind is blown.
look, I've been over here just like taking little notes and stuff, and like I said, this is a true gem, joy, and a blessing for me, because honestly, that's actually where I'm at in my life right now, just working on that foundation, digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper before we do anything. And I know sometimes it feels like, hey, are we moving backwards? And I'm like, no, we're not. Like, we're just going deep. And like comparing things on the surface where it's like, oh, do you have kids at this point? And, like the American dream, instead of figuring out what is it that we want for ourselves and who we are and how can we create the life that we're truly going to be happy with.
A succinct way to say everything that I just said is, and I use this method in coaching because it really, anytime I get involved in coaching, it's either maybe there's an affair already and it's already flying apart at the seams. What is required in a successful marriage is 2 strong I's before you can have a strong we. So you'll run into a paradox of when do you have kids. Some people will tell you there's never a good time to have kids. Just when you think you're ready, just pull the trigger. But a simple way to say it is, do we both have strong I's before we even create a stronger we by having kids in it? By having a strong I, you have boundaries, you have vision for your life, you have an ability to make happiness on your own, because you are not responsible for each other's happiness. And if you can't manufacture happiness for yourself, you're not ready. And being able to understand how to be that mature, emotionally regulated, calm human being that can have healthy responses no matter what life gives them, that's a strong I. And essentially, it's what level of adulting have you gotten to? Like most people say adulting is hard. Well, adulting never really gets easy, but life's a really good teacher. And so if you're paying attention to the lessons life gives you, you generally learn how to pass the test. And if you get to a point where you're passing the test that life gives you in a healthy, mature, capable way, you have a strong I. And then you have this amazing foundation that builds a strong we. And then you have this idea that you both have such a strong love internally, that you've created such a deep love for yourself, because there's the highest level of love, as I have learned it, is I love me for your benefit. That there's so much within me that it flows over into you. And by bringing it together, by both flowing over, you create something that blows both your minds. And it takes you to a place that you never felt love could feel that good.
The American dream. That's what it should be. For sure.
And we always get that out of order, either through all the different reasons that life goes off the wagon. But it really, almost in every case where I understand that a marriage is off the wagon or off the wheels, it comes down to there's usually not a strong I on one side, and one person is trying to count on the other person for happiness. And it's not supposed to work that way. You can't feed each other joy. And because one's having a bad day, it gets tainted with a bad flavor, or they leave out the oregano and then you don't like it without the oregano. And then you get mad. It's like, well, it's not their job to feed you the right oregano. It's your job to find the right oregano.
Absolutely.
So that makes my mind go to how do we give and respond to feedback?
Is there an example that comes to your mind that?
Well, really, it was
a specific question
that came to mind when you were saying like the oregano story. Like if somebody put too much or too little oregano in something, it's just like, okay, how do you give that feedback? But then if you're on the other end, like how do you respond to it?
I'll give one analogy because oregano isn't my go-to analogy. So the best analogy I've come up to explain this is Thanksgiving dinner. So if you have turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes on a plate, you've got a pretty good Thanksgiving. But what makes all three of those better?
Green bean casserole? Gravy?
Nope. Gravy.
You're with?
Gravy. Marriage is the gravy that makes everything on the plate better. But the recipes for all three of those are really good independently on their own. So like that's the best way is like, are you being the potatoes on someone else's plate? Because it's not your job to be the potatoes on someone else's plate. It's your job to be the gravy that makes the potatoes good. And if the oregano is wrong or the sage is wrong on the stuffing, gravy can cover it up, but the stuffing still sucks. And it's your job to fix the stuffing, not the gravy. So use that analogy to kind of frame what I'm about ready to say. But the first mindset with feedback is all feedback is a gift. All feedback is a gift. Doesn't mean it's right, but all feedback is a gift. And so when someone gives you feedback, you first have to adopt like, man, I am so lucky and grateful that I got a chance to see maybe how I'm showing up in the world isn't right. It's not personal. It's actually out of love. The right feedback is almost always out of love. And maybe it's the wrong kind of feedback, and there's some hurtful words in it. The best way to deal with it is take out what's useful, take out what's true, and throw away the rest. You don't have to accept all the feedback. You don't even often need to challenge the feedback. You often just need to, what's true? Oh, I can take that and apply it and then run with it. Now, maybe if the feedback is given to you in a negative way or aggressive way or in a shouting kind of way, the simplest way to challenge that is simply to say, don't ever talk to me that way again. It sounds weird and it sounds awkward, but that is the most healthy thing you can do to anybody that's disrespecting you. And that's the better angle to use is no one will respect you more than you respect yourself. And if you're looking at this self-respect and someone's degrading it, there is not a single scenario ever that someone should be allowed to take you down. That in every scenario, no matter who it is, your mom, your dad, your grandfather, your husband, your wife, anybody degrading your self-respect, you have a right to say, don't ever talk to me that way again. Now that's level 1. And if they're not respecting it, you can go to like a level 7, which would be maybe throwing a few swear words in there. But you always want to start with level 1. Or you could often say, excuse me, give them a chance to correct it and be like, what's going on here? But we're also talking about boundaries. So having healthy boundaries of how people talk to you. And there's another element within this feedback that often comes up in marriage is if there's one spouse or the other is the one that does all the shouting and maybe all the berating and just beats them down to a pulp, or her. Something that I have learned within my own coaching and some of the people I've worked through and some of the things I've worked through is it's actually my fault that's happening because I'm the one allowing it. Life only changes when your willingness to do something about it changes. And so if you don't like how people talk to you, change it. And we allow, and people will treat us however we allow. And usually if the standard's low, and most people don't even do it intentionally. They just learn that this is how they can talk to you. They don't know that it drives you nuts. They don't know that it hurts your feelings. So raising the standard of how you allow people to talk to you is one of the easiest ways to make an easier, better, healthier life, because you're raising, like, if you're going to be in the room with me and you're going to talk to me this way, you've got to be here. And if we're not going to be here, I'm going to walk away.
Absolutely.
Whether that be at work, it could be a friendship, whatever it may be. And the other cool part about boundaries is you don't need two-way permission for boundaries. And like, this is what it is. I don't need your agreement. This is an is what it is kind of thing. You don't have to agree with what I just said. But what I just said is how it's going to be.
That's my favorite part. I get to decide.
And we often don't think we get to decide, especially if we didn't learn to trust ourselves, if our voice didn't matter when we were growing up, or to survive, we had to silence our voice.
So,
Yep.
I know as we come to the end of this, I have this this deck of cards here, and what I do is I just kind of shuffle through them and pull out 2 cards, random question on each card, and we're just going to ask you. So the first one that came up was, what advice would your older self give you right now?
I feel like I'm already utilizing it, but the advice that I'm running on, essentially, because I've used this question. So I lost my job in 2020, 2 months before COVID hit. And this question came to my mind, is that I had the belief that I was 50, I was never going to wish I ran out and got a job faster. I'm going to wish I had more time with my kids. And even now, 4 years later, life isn't always easy. Bills are paid, but life could be better. But I know that when I'm 50, I'm not going to wish for more money. I'm going to wish for more time. And so the older version of yourself, looking back, is always going to wish you paid attention to the times that mattered. And when most anybody that's probably over 50, the season they want most, especially if they were drunk on work, is they're going to want the ages between 0 and 10 back. And that area, that age is a time that never happens twice. And once it's gone, it's gone. You'll never get to see your daughter in kindergarten singing a spring sing ever again. And if you didn't prioritize that spring concert, that moment's gone. It's not recreatable. And your 50-year-old self is going to have to deal with the guilt of missing the times it did matter and you were chasing the things that didn't. And the final thought with that is the only people who remember the late nights at the office are your kids.
That just gave me chills. I love that.
Man, I appreciate that, because it gives me something to look forward to. It's like, I don't even have kids, but like, man, I'm like, those are going to be some great moments. All right. The second question that I pulled from this card is, what is the name of this chapter in your life?
What is the name of this chapter in my life? Surrender.
Okay. Why?
That wasn't the question.
Only 2 questions, Tino.
yeah, but that's because usually, man.
So the word surrender is something I've been working on for like 3 years. But the idea, and this is more of an Eastern philosophy idea, is that we have no control over the universe. Everything in front of us has been unfolding for 13.8 billion years, and it's just physics. And we often get really emotional with physics when physics doesn't have personality. Physics doesn't have emotions. It just is. But man, do we make emotional messes out of physics. And trying to get the universe in front of me to change, to be a certain way so that I can finally be okay, will never happen. There's not a single thing in the known universe that you could change, that you have any power over to physically rearrange, that will finally make the storm inside go away. The only way to make the storm go away is to make the storm go away on the inside, not the outside. And so it doesn't matter whether your house is burning down with emotions. You still need to feel the calm on the inside. So an act of surrender is a reminder that I have no control, and I'm just going, and I this comes up as a little mantra that every day the universe gives me millions of moments. The only thing the universe asks me to do is to make the ones that I get a little better than I found it.
Mm-hmm.
And surrendering means that God already knows where I'm going, and I'm going to surrender to his timing, not my timing. I didn't think Evan, my youngest son, was ever going to happen, but I eventually held my son, and I'm like, well played, God. Well played. And the idea of surrender also then takes away the misery of being frustrated, not being where I want to be, but trusting that I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah. Man, that just sits.
That's
that
the
just
high
sits
surface.
in
There's
you.
1,000 more layers that I do within coaching clients to get there, or to help them realize like why they're like. One of my favorite little fun jokes is, Ashley or Tino, have you guys ever lost sleep that Saturn has rings and Mars doesn't?
Maybe that one time. No.
So if you've never lost sleep that Saturn has rings and Mars doesn't, it's the same set of physics that gave Saturn rings that gave us the moment in front of us right now. So if you don't lose sleep over one, why would you lose sleep over the other?
Absolutely.
Because it's not about the physics, it's about what you believe about the physics. And it's like how you first learned that the butterfly was good and the snake was bad. They're neither. But it's what you learned about those physics that made them bad or good. And that's what the root of suffering comes from when you're dealing with the stuff on the inside. It's what you learned about the physics that makes it bad or good. And you got to change that belief and surrender in order to really come to that place of peace that you're looking for on the inside.
Man. Okay. So how can people find you?
I'm pretty much omnipresent on any platform that you can possibly think of by Ben Killoy. My website, benkilloy.com, is the place where you can see the kind of work that I do. If you want to look at speaking, benkilloyspeaks.com is my speaking website. I'm willing to have conversations with pretty much anybody. I'm an open book, and I would love to help work with anybody. And one of my primary parts of my component is True North, because a lot of times with True North, North isn't what most people want. True North is what people want. And that's a key component of what I help people find and get to.
Man, you can't just say that without having to unpack that a little bit. Most people want North, but they really want True North.
Well, North is like the standard 3-lane American dream of like, head down this and it'll take you. But the difference between True North and North is only a few degrees. But if you travel off course for a few degrees, you'll end up in a completely different spot. Even just 1 hour, 3 degrees off course, you'll be 100 miles off course in an hour.
Yeah.
And understanding something as simple as saying, where are you going? Do you know where you're going? Do you know why it's important to get there? Most people don't know where they're going. They just operate on this standard north. But to go true north is actually to more tune into the frequency of your soul and listen to the whispers of it to understand what it's been trying to tell you most of your life.
Man, I could apply that to so much of what we do, Ashley, where it's just like, hey, this is the map that people have given a lot of our clients. And it's just like, that's not where you want to go. But
and
most people don't have there's another component to this is more in men, but men in general have a very difficult time dreaming. If I go up to anybody and ask them, what's your dream life? Most people can't tell me. We have been fed a lie of making a living for so long that most people are never taught how to live. And to dream is really in the how to live category. And if you don't find yourself with the capacity to dream, or you're just running on repeat because you don't have any better where to go, that would be a great sign to work with coaching. And sometimes people struggle. Do I need coaching or do I need therapy? If you think of a sine wave, some electricity guy, if you think of a sine wave, therapy is best at getting that sine wave back to a sine wave. So if you hit that sine wave with a load like a generator, that sine wave starts changing. There's a regulation loop in a generator to get it back to 60 hertz. How fast you can get back to 60 hertz is therapy. If it's weeks and months, therapy. If it's seconds, you're probably really good. But if you want more in life, you need width. And width comes from that sine wave getting bigger. And if you convert it to electricity again, that's how you determine the voltage between 120 and 240 or even 480 type industrial complexes. The higher the voltage, the more work you can do. And so if you need more in your life, you need a bigger sine wave, and coaching makes more work and more width on that sine wave, because that'll help you understand how you can do more with the same amount of time in your life and get to the places you want to go. But if you're struggling regulating, getting back to a baseline of, oh man, I feel like, okay, I'm okay again, then you need therapy.
Look, there are two people who came to mind that I'm like, oh, the conversation that the three of you would have, I just want to just sit back
Be
and
applying the wall.
Oh yeah, yeah. It just hit me like it's so clear. Oh man, I got to see how I can set that up. But Ben, man, I truly appreciate this. If anybody got something from this, I definitely did. Like literally.
Hopefully there was something for everybody, and it was everything I shared comes from a furnace where the steel from that is really strong, and the hotter the steel or hotter the furnace, the stronger the steel. And it's that ability to create that strong steel that creates a really great life. And my furnace has been turned on up to 10,000 degrees some years, it feels like. And even within 1 month, I often would joke with my therapist when we check in every week. I'm like, I feel like I've lived an entire life since we've talked last. Like sometimes a week feels like a lifetime to me. I've made so much growth. And so understanding, and this is one thing within fathers. Fathers are like oxygen to their sons. And as a father, you can either be the CO2 that keeps the temperature down in that furnace that never can do anything, or you can be the oxygen to your son's furnace that helps get it hot and understanding what he can build from it. And that's something that all of this wisdom comes from. And hopefully I've got it succinct enough that it was easy for you guys to understand.
Yeah, it was truly gold for me. Gold. How you feeling, Ashley?
Good. I always feel good after these meetings of the minds like this. I always walk away with something. I don't know what it is every time, but it's something.
And sometimes you might not even realize what you took away until life gives you moments, because sometimes even when you're in coaching for 90 days, it could be a year later before that thing clicks. But you don't know it, and then you're like, oh, that's what that was talking about.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Sometimes seeds are planted, but they're like a bamboo tree. They grow 6 inches over like 6 years, and then they shoot up like 10 feet in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is there anything that you two want to leave the people?
I would just remember and remind that two simplest things I try to give every human being is you are always one hello away from a completely different life. Hello is the most powerful word you'll ever learn. Learn to yield that, and you can change your life one conversation at a time. And the more opportunity you have in life is directly proportional to the amount of those hellos being new. Those are two things that would have changed my life when I got out of the Marine Corps.
That is amazing. I'm just going to repeat something that you said. Just, I truly hope everybody lives a life that they love, that they live, and that they lead. And with that being said, Ashley, unless you got anything,
I think, Ben, I think what you do is so important, not just to the people that you help, but for our community as a whole. And I just, if you don't think you need coaching, then you probably need coaching. It's best to just try it out, see if it works for you, because everybody benefits from everybody else knowing their true north. So,
well, the opposite of all this is, what is it costing you not having your true north?
Absolutely.
And most dads don't wake up till their daughter comes home pregnant and they realize, oh, I think I missed a few chapters.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. With that being said, we're going to end it. Everybody, I hope y'all have a great day. Bye-bye. Follow Ben.
And thank you, Tino, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you.
Oh, man, we got to do something else in the near future. I just got to reach out to a couple of people. But with that, I hope y'all have a great day.
Thank you.